Hey there gamers, DreamcastGuy here, and today I want to talk about the failure of the Nintendo Switch 2, or I guess I should say the lack of hype, because I've been covering gaming hardware for over a decade. You can watch old videos on my channel going back literally 10 years ago reviewing like 3DSs and stuff like that. I mean, I have been covering lots of different eras, PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo, and it's very strange that right now we are 72 hours from the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, and I feel like you wouldn't know it. There's no big countdowns, there's no big hype, there's no big parties, there's no hyper-analyzing trailers. It just feels like a lot of people, even Nintendo fans, seem to be kind of saying, meh. Now, does that come down to the fact that there's not a lot of launch games? It's just Mario Kart and Cyberpunk, basically, that look halfway decent? Is it the fact that people are just bored of the Nintendo Switch? Because it is a strange thing that right now, the Nintendo Switch 1 is one of the most popular systems of all time. Over 150 million sold, billions and billions just generated in raw profit, even from the hardware itself. But with the Switch 2, it doesn't have those games. It doesn't have that love. It's got $80 exclusives for Mario Kart. It's got $100 controllers. It's got a $500 console. We have truly entered a different era of Nintendo, and it does feel like people are saying, I'm not sure I want to invest into this new vibe of Nintendo, which seems to be pay before you even enjoy the play. Let me explain what I'm talking about, and I want to take a look at a bunch of hot takes, because it feels like even Nintendo people are kind of saying, is this going to work? Let me talk. Hi, hope you're having a great day, and if you could, please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, I have to admit that part of the motivation for this video is that I saw a lot of crazy stuff, like even mainstream journalists and stuff kind of paying attention to the fact that there really just isn't that much buzz. There's not that much excitement for the future of Nintendo. I even saw stuff like this. Did You Know Gaming is a kind of a trivia channel. They've gone back years and years and years, and I found it fascinating that yesterday they put up a video that for the first time ever in the channel's history is hypercritical of Nintendo, which is the fact that Nintendo is now going for extra expensive products, trying to basically see how expensive they can make stuff and people will still buy it. And that's very antithetical to classic Nintendo. People forget the fact that, like, they've always tried to make stuff as cheap as possible. $200 even at launch consoles at times, or $99 Game Boy Advances. Like, you guys truly cannot imagine how accessible to a broke kid growing up, how Nintendo was a lot of ways the place to play, because it was where you got good games, good exclusives, cool RPGs like Pokemon and stuff, and before all that, it was affordable. They're giving up affordability, and I feel like the higher price does not match the power output. Now, I do think part of it just does come down to the fact that a lot of the advertising for it, like today, they just announced this like 30 minutes ago. Hey, here's a 60 FPS patch for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Oh yeah, those games that launched totally broken. Well, they still look very, very empty, but look, now it's less broken. Can you really say that this is exciting? Can you really say, yeah, man, that's totally worth $500 to play that game from years ago, but it's less busted? This to me is just, it's not only not exciting, it almost shows how little they have to show off. In fact, a lot of the replies are about, hey, look, man, you got to buy that game. Here's that FPS and less bugs. Everybody basically is in the reply like, okay, so they're fixing a broken game that shouldn't have been broken in the first place. Everybody is like, man, I just don't care about this. I'm not buying a Switch 2 to play last gen Pokemon at a more stable frame rate. That's just not exciting. Now, part of my motivation for this video was that I was critical of the original Nintendo Switch at launch. And a lot of it just came down to the fact that after the complete dumpster fire of the Wii U, I was a bit afraid that the Nintendo Switch really was underpowered. It just didn't seem to make sense to me as a product. But as it existed, as it got more games, as it got more ports, as it got stuff like classic Final Fantasies and all sorts of really cool stuff, I was really impressed by the passion that grew for the original Nintendo Switch. Like, when I see fan art like this to me, this is Nintendo. It's not just the games, It's this passion. This is something that feels very unique to Nintendo fans that I've always very much admired. I mean, look at this. The fact that it's got Xenoblade, you can see Mario right here, you got Samus. Oh my god, Breath of the Wild, you can see some Pokemon in here. This art is not just fantastic, it's absolutely super impressive. It evokes a sense of nostalgia and love for the current tense. This is going to be the kind of stuff that people are going to look back on as the good old days. But when I think of the Nintendo Switch 2, I just feel like I don't feel that same zest. It does feel like, hey, what if we took this, but instead scaled down the fun, scaled down the prices, scaled down everything. Well, I guess scaled down everything except the prices, because they're definitely trying to make it as expensive as possible. I do think that some of the negative hype has just been about how pricey it is, and the fact that there have just been so many bad headlines. Nintendo has admitted the fact that they can break your Switch 2 if you do anything at all suspicious. If you try to game share and appear offline, they can just remote deactivate permanently your Nintendo Switch 2. They can just brick it. Your Nintendo Switch 2 requires constant online updates. Stuff like that, not a big thing. Also, the fact that they keep canceling pre-orders, so even the few people that are trying to buy it, yeah, good luck. There's a good chance you're not going to get it. I'm in a spot now where I think that Nintendo Switch has tried too hard to be a company, and it's ended up blowing up in their faces. I think that the best eras of PlayStation, like the PS4 era, the PlayStation 3 era, and the best era of Nintendo is when they came out and just felt like dudes. It did feel like when they came out and we saw someone wearing a Crash Bandicoot shirt doing the Crash is back. Whenever they would talk about the PlayStation Vita, whenever PlayStation would come out and talk about a deal with Hideo Kojima to make Death Stranding, it felt like your bros making cool art. When Nintendo came out and talked about a new Donkey Kong, when Nintendo came out and talked about these big ambitious projects, stuff like Mario Odyssey, which immediately was mind-blowing, it felt like they understood the magic of games. And now that the magic has faded and these are just corporations, it does feel like the silence of PlayStation is deafening. It's boring. It ends up hurting them because there's just nothing to be hyped about. And it seems like Nintendo has followed that trend. Of all things, they've followed that trend. I found this random tweet here and I decided to verify it. It is real. For the United States, for the past 90 days, people are Googling PlayStation 5 like 10 times more than they're Googling the Nintendo Switch 2. This is kind of insane. And you can see the window here. This is going from March 1st to July. So this is current data, to June. This is current data. We're coming up on the launch, and we have a bump this tiny that it's still twice as low as just random averages of the PS5. That does to me, I think this tweet is correct, it does evoke the fact that there's just no interest in the Switch 2. Maybe that's just the fact that it's not anywhere to see. It doesn't really soak into that casual gamer ethos. Like 5 days from launch, this is a tweet by Woodhawker. He's one of the biggest, and in my opinion, one of the best Nintendo Switch YouTubers. Obviously, I'm biased. He's a buddy of mine. Love you, Wood. But he points out the fact that at his local GameStop, there is literally no marketing for the Nintendo Switch 2. I also saw this video where someone showed this is a Target, literally filmed today, and they showed the fact that literally, where's the Nintendo Switch 2 signage? Where's the Nintendo Switch 2 pre-orders? Where's the Nintendo Switch 2 games? Where's the Nintendo Switch 2 controllers? It seems like nobody cares at all for the Nintendo Switch 2, not even these retailers. There was this article that came out last night that I kind of want to talk about. Nintendo ended up releasing a statement saying this is false, but I do still find it interesting. Mokazuki has posted a bunch of different articles across the last couple years about essentially the business of Nintendo, what they're doing, why they're doing it. And he said that Nintendo is jacking up the price of the Nintendo Switch so they can make more upfront cash. They want you to pay as much as you can possibly get squeezed out of you so they make more profit. And they want to pass this on to the retailers. Retailers typically earn about 3% of the money for each console sold. They're trying to bump that up to 5%. Now, Nintendo has claimed this is a lie, but to me, this almost evokes the fact that I do think that Nintendo is afraid of the Switch 2 not selling at all. the Nintendo Switch sitting on store shelves. They want these people to push it. They want the retailers to advertise it, to give it good store space, to put it at the front, to make sure it's advertised. And I almost see this as a very, very bad sign. I think the Nintendo Switch 2 is oddly going to sit in the shadow of the Nintendo Switch 1 for at least a year or two minimum. Very, very, very minimum. It's weird that the Nintendo Switch has been so successful at converting people that are non-gamers into gamers and then into hardcore gamers. But I do think a lot of those people went on to buy PCs, to buy PlayStation 5s, to move on to other systems. And now, if they're looking at the power of their PlayStation 5 or playing on their Steam Deck, and you go, hey, time to buy a new $500 Nintendo Switch, which has a worse battery life, which has mostly digital games, which has the most expensive games on the market, the most expensive controllers, a lot of people are just saying, no thanks, I'm good. Which is not good for Nintendo. But these have just been some off-the-cuff thoughts. How do you feel about the Nintendo Switch 2 launch? And does this seem correct? Or are you more thinking that Nintendo will be fine? This is being overly skeptical of a business plan that historically has worked out. Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and please keep dreaming. This art is so good. I'll be honest, I have looked at this art like 10 times and it still just blows my mind. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.